data-informed decision or data-driven decision? And I was like, look, I sit in the camp, I'm not a data-driven decision type person, because as that leader, it's going to inform what I do. I just need, as you astutely pointed out, who's delivering it, how are you presenting it, how are you laying it out, so that I can make a decision. I don't necessarily believe in, some people do, that it's going to drive my decisions. I mean, yeah, the dashboard may tell me what the dashboard is going to tell me. But again, judgment. It can't give me judgment. It can't give me, the reasoning. It doesn't have that in there. It may give me some good answers that look well.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for all of our regular listeners on another episode of Conversations on Retail, Asset Protection and Risk Mitigation series. Most of you all know me, the host, Brand Elverston, still recovering Walmart in the asset protection industry, a military veteran. And so we have a really special guest this time, guys. I will fill in the blanks on how I met General Beagle, but he is our guest today. And really, sir, what caught my eye with you on LinkedIn was your article that you published, I think, back in September, Faster Wars, Smarter Minds. And guys, so for the civilian contingent of our listener base, this directly applies to the civilian workforce. Doug McMillon, CEO of Walmart, made a much more balanced assessment of AI in the workforce and simply said it will change every job. But he did not say, we're going to lay off 40% of the workforce, we're going to automate X, Y, and Z. It was much more balanced. And of course, we have the two extremes of people that are saying AI is not what it's made up to be, and the others that say it will supplant humanity. As it usually goes, somewhere in the middle is the truth. Yep. So General Beagle, guys, his was most recently the commanding general of the Combined Arms Center in Fort Leavenworth, and I'll ask him to fill in some blanks on that, and the commandant of what's called the Command and General Staff College, both at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, just, northwest of Kansas City a little bit.
Correct.
So, sir, welcome. This is quite an honor to have an hour of your time to talk to us about AI. So I'll ask you to fill in the blanks on your intro, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Brad, thanks a lot. It's been great since we connected, probably a little bit over a month or so ago, and I think a little bit longer than that on LinkedIn, but absolutely enjoyed all of our conversations. I look forward to this one today, and to very briefly fill in the blanks on, Fort Leavenworth and what we did at the Combined Arms Center. I would always describe it this way to most audiences. And I said, it's not my name. It's not a name that was given internally to Leavenworth, but Fort Leavenworth is the intellectual center of the Army, because all things that our Army does flow through Leavenworth in some shape, form, or fashion. It's ironic you mentioned Doug McMillon, the owner of Walmart, but I would use that example all the time. And it really resonated in multiple venues, because I would say, when you think about Fort Leavenworth this way, all of our senior leaders, all the 4-stars that we have in the Army, come to Fort Leavenworth 7 times a year. And I would say, if that was your Walmart in your small town or big town, whatever you consider it, and the CEO of Walmart came to visit that Walmart 7 times a year, that would tell you something about that Walmart, right?
Yes.
Either what's wrong or they're doing something really, really well, because we do every aspect of training, leader development, education for the Army. And from that position, we touch the entire Army. There's not a part of it we're not going to touch, whether it's physically coming to Fort Leavenworth for a course or through the distributed manner. And when I say distributed, the 9 centers of excellence, all 2-star led commands, to include the Sergeant Major's Academy, that were underneath Leavenworth. So Leavenworth is from coast to coast, East Coast, all the way out to the West Coast with the Defense Language Institute. And we touch every aspect of our Army in terms of how it integrates, how the Army changes, and then the bridge between the current force and the future force. And most didn't realize that as well. But where we sit as the Combined Arms Center was between the 2 old commands that are now one command, Army Futures Command and Training Doctrine Command. So the only command uniquely that's set in the middle of current and future. So phenomenal place to be. Different surprise every single day, but it was great.
That's great. Yeah, the last time I was at Leavenworth, and it was called CASQ back in the day, and I can't remember what that stood for, but I was at Leavenworth. I actually spent my first wedding anniversary there. We got married, moved to Germany, and then the battalion commander selected me for battery command and said, "Well, you're going to have to go to CASQ before you take the battery." And so my wife stayed in Germany, and I headed to Fort Leavenworth. And I have to chuckle, with my civilian counterparts about all the travel we did at Walmart. And is my family okay with that? And exactly, sir. I kind of chuckle. I'm like, well, let me share you my first wedding anniversary. We were 4,000 miles apart. But that was my last experience with Leavenworth. So let's jump right into it, sir. That article you wrote, Faster Wars, Smarter Minds, and the gap between the two. Let's start out kind of with your assessment of AI in really toning it down, because there's plenty of hype out there that everybody reads in the media, and it's beginning to settle down, at least in private sector, to what it really is going to be able to do for them. What's your assessment? Is it overhyped, or we're still in the growth spurt?
Yeah, no, I probably sit somewhere right in the middle, but I definitely would not say it's overhyped, because the capabilities, the technology is phenomenal, and the way it's being used across the board, the hype is there. I mean, there is something to all the hype, and there's this old model, I forget how far it dates back, called the hype model, right? And it
Yeah,
kind of
the Gartner hype cycle.
yeah, hype cycle, it comes down, but I think the hype is all worth it because of the
Okay.
technology, the capabilities, the abilities of generative AI, large language models, and machine learning. But one thing I would say, Brand, I think is oversold, at this point, because now we're putting it everywhere and claiming that it will do a lot of different things for us that are, in my view, not necessarily true, because we fail to, think about sometimes things that, all these AI capabilities, large language models won't do is the things that the humans do. I mean, judgment, reasoning, initiative. I can share a little story side vignette, later on, but it doesn't have those things. End of the day, it's still about ones and zeros. And I'm no expert, but linked to what I described previously in my job at Leavenworth, I really had to get my arms around it. And it was an author, former soldier, John Antal, wrote a great book, 7 Seconds to Die. And he's an expert, I think, on all things that are changing in Russia, Ukraine. And I love his readings. I've had him come out several times and talk to us, but he mentioned a quote one day that really resonated. And that's the quote that kind of got me to really focusing on education. What are we doing for the human? And he said, the speed of warfare is outpacing human cognition. And that's all he had to say in my mind. And I'm like, yeah, what are we doing? And so, given what we do in terms of doctrine training, leader development, and education, that's where I started to drill down. I go, you know what? We're actually behind in that space with regard to AI.
That's exactly what caught my attention on your article. And, I have, as many of the listeners know, I had 12 years active duty field artillery officer. And coincidentally, sir, interestingly, I see you're a criminal justice undergrad degree, as was I at the University of Alabama. So common thread there. But that's what caught my attention because, yes, I retired from W-2 life in 2017 from Walmart after 22 great years in the headquarters. But in many ways, it's like I never left. I still live here in Bentonville. I'm in the Walmart gym 5 days a week. I mean, it's a very close community. But I can see where that resonates in private sector. In a lot of my mentoring conversations with students at both Auburn University and University of Alabama, is the pretty significant concern of about to be graduating students is what I've done the last 4 years. Am I going to be immediately irrelevant in the landscape? Or how do I prepare for that so I'm not vulnerable as soon as I graduate, unless I have a master's degree in AI? So talk a little bit about exactly those gaps, or of what you just stated very clearly are the gap between current state and future state, and how do we fill that gap?
Yeah, I'll describe what we did at Leavenworth. And when you think about our field grades, so our field grades, as you know, the audience may not know, is your mid-grade level leaders that pretty much run a great portion of our army. We call them majors, as you know, and we are going to have all of our majors for 10 months. And in some cases, you have a very small cohort for an additional year of education. And then they go out to every formation inside the Army. And starting there, we always talk about critical thinking, and they're going to learn skills just like your student would at Auburn or Alabama, and then have that concern about being irrelevant because of all the technology that's out there. Same case in the Army. We've got new technologies, next generation command and control systems coming out. Our formations are changing, et cetera. The list goes on. And we fundamentally think about critical thinking, but looking at where we are in this landscape, we peeled it back a second and started thinking about creative thinking. And that's something that you lose over time. So we partnered with another person at Ohio State University, Angus Fletcher, wrote a great book, but he did some work with special operations, believe it or not. So I had several conversations with Angus, go, how do we balance the two, critical thinking and creative thinking? How do you use the technology that's there? Because when you think about AI, and I would say this to the workforce, in order not to spook the herd, because like you said, we're on two ends of the spectrum. Most of the workforce is on that far end of the spectrum. I'm going to lose my job. I'm not going to have any, more work to do anywhere in the workforce. And I said, look, think about it this way. That AI, that technology, large language models, they're designed to help augment or automate those things that require human cognition. So guess what? You're using that to augment you. It's additional intelligence. And it's back to my point about being oversold. Yeah, some cases. I mean, if you're going to build a robot that can do things that a human did, okay, I get it. But now who fixes the robot? Who knows when that thing is having problems or not making, I wouldn't say AI makes decisions, but it's not doing the right things or doing things unethically. Now,
Right.
now the kind of gain is back to the human because it doesn't have reasoning. It doesn't have, logic per se, other than ones and zeros. So now how do we get ahead of that? I'll pause there for a second because I wanted to explain to you very hard without the slide, but I think something that you and I've talked about where we are in, complexity writ large, and then where we stand in terms of the human, the process, and the people.
Yeah, I think, in my assessment with the students and on the board at University of Alabama, and they're very keenly aware and they're ahead of the game on AI instruction. They saw the train coming, but there's still, when you have a student body of 40,000, you can't flip a switch and say, okay, you have to go through, 101, 101, and 102 AI instruction to get you up to speed. So they're playing catch up like most everybody else is trying to figure out what right looks like. Um, but the students graduating now is really where that pressure, I feel like, is palpable with the ones that don't have the opportunity to go and take a course on AI because they walk across stage in May. And they're looking for their first job in the professional world and largely in private sector, some in public sector, the three-letter agencies where you would expect criminal justice graduates and cyber professionals to join. Okay, so do you see, and in all fairness to you, sir, and the audience, you only retired a month ago?
A month ago, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll balance out this conversation a little bit. Obviously, how many years, sir, by the way, were you active?
35 years.
35 years. That's awesome. So do you see differences in our conversation thus far in the challenges private sector will face versus military, or do you see it much the same, the gap?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are the same. And if I were to compare, not that I speak for all the Army, and you'd think private, public,
Yeah.
the military is much more like private because I mean we're kind of a closed loop. And again, I hope not to offend or be disrespectful to either one of those sectors, but
Yeah.
it's a little bit more closed loop. And so when you ask me, or if you were to ask me, where's the advantage going to be? Who's going to, who has the best chance to leverage this? I would say public, because in that public space, I think you just have more that are looking at things in different ways, different applications, and then the ability to scale. Then now, how do you scale it? How do you sustain it? How do you integrate it? Because my view, public is so much bigger. I think they're going to be able to leverage that advantage, sooner and potentially better. But when you're private, like the military, now we're starting to integrate better with academia, corporate, technology companies, et cetera, in order to keep up with the pace of warfare. But because we were kind of closed, more of that private type model. And again, I'm not sure if that accurately describes it. But I think that's where the advantage is going to lie. But I think many of those gaps still exist there. You're still going to have to upskill the workforce. You're still going to have to do things like micro learning. So it's a constant need to learn and understand what you have. And but it links back to the human. What does a human need to bring to the table that these systems won't have, and I don't think they will ever have, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah, and I'll use Doug again, Doug McMillan's in public statements. None of this is confidential, but he's much in that camp that we're going to upskill the existing workforce and we're going to figure out what this can and can't do. And he's very tempered. Of course, I know Doug. I mean, we're not buddies, but you work in the same building for 22 years. You see people, and he's always very measured and thoughtful about things before he jumps off on a tangent like some of the other CEOs have, and very public proclamations and mass layoffs. That's not his style. So understanding that AI is a little bit more than running a query in Chat GPT and putting a question in, I think he's eager to learn as much of what it can and can't do in exactly this conversation. And then as those learnings begin to come in and they become force multipliers, that's where I think they'll find their feet, if you will. And they'll be able to say, okay, heavy automation in distribution centers. But when it comes to compliance and ethics and those kinds of things and legal, there's a huge human injection, if you will, that will remain. There won't be autopilot. So I wish I could think off the top of my head. There were a couple of other private companies, that did do mass layoffs and that it didn't work well based on AI and had to go back and rehire within the last 6 or 8 months or so. A term that when I wrote my second book, I guess that was in 22 or 21, and in the research, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, Burn Revenge, the technological singularity, the concept of. And that was decades ago. That wasn't something that popped out in the age of the internet. In that the concept is technological singularity is exactly what we're talking about. Have we reached a point where technology is outpacing our ability to, number one, understand it, and more importantly, number two, control it? Do you see that as a current threat or something we should be keeping an eye on, or how do you see that filtering in?
Yeah, no, and that's huge. And I haven't done a lot of reading on Vernon Venge like you, but I do know part of what he asserted too was at some point we're going to create an intelligence that is beyond anything at the human level, and it's that leap that's going to catch us all by surprise. I mean, I don't think we're there now, but do I think we'll get there at some point? Absolutely. You start adding in quantum and other things. I mean, no doubt we'll get there, but I still don't see how, at least in my small, simple mind at this point in time, how are you going to have a system that can do the things that a human can do? I mean, you mentioned ethics, ethical, right? But how do you really get that integrated in to where now the reasoning is good? It has good judgment. I mean, morals, those things that only the human can do. I mean, that part is hard for me to see, but to create a Uber, Chat GPT, that type thing, absolutely, it's coming at some point in time. Not a matter if, a matter of when. But the thing that really scares me, Brand, is things that we're seeing now. Believe it or not, if you take a step back and look at it, it's evolutionary. I mean, yeah, not a real surprise. We get to Chat GPT. We'll just keep using that as an example, not being disrespectful of it. A lot of great capabilities, but we just kind of evolved. I mean, some saw it coming sooner than others. But when we get to that point where, we have this revolution where we just leap over what we thought was in the realm of the possible and we're not ready for that, I think that's when we're going to have problems because now we've not put ourselves in that position to be ahead of all this. And I'll go back to the diagram I was going to explain that you and I talked about, but try to explain to the audience. And I use it in many audiences, in my last job. And I said, you have to think about organizational complexity and look at that line. If we were looking at it on the XY, axis, and that thing is just going, almost straight up, almost vertical in terms of organizational complexity. And that more reference to the Army, because we're changing what our organizations look like based on technology. Then there's systems complexity added to that as well. Systems complexity is also going up. Those two lines are on par, just shooting up almost like skyrockets. And the line that is lagging, and we can't afford to let that line lag behind, is the people and process complexity, people over process. So now, how are we going to catch our people up to what we see is already out ahead of us, so that now we're ahead? We're in that position. So if we do have this big revolution, we've thought about it, we've educated to it, we've put our policies, we put governance, all that in place to go, yeah, we can kind of see this coming, and here's how we're postured to catch it. If we're just trying to catch up to it, it's just going to continue to outpace it, because every new thing that comes on, it causes a change. And then we can't let all those changes catch us by surprise.
Yeah, and this may be an unfair question. OBC and OAC, the officer's basic course. So for the civilians, every officer, once you commission, unless you're an academy grad, academy grads do too. You go to about a 6-month school in your assigned branch. So I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma as a field artillery officer. Sir, I believe you went to Fort Benning. Yep. For infantry officers basic, and I know it's probably called something different now, but that's further academic and field education for the listeners, that when you graduate, then you go to your assigned units, and then you're there for a few years and you come back for the advanced course.
Yeah.
Are the courses already teaching AI? So officers basic, whatever it's called now, is that part of the curriculum? Can you share that? If not,
yeah, no, absolutely. So now it's captain's career course. So from what we remember, okay, basic, it was always the basic course for everybody. Now it's just your captain's career course. The next one is your captain's advanced course, kind of similar, but we are. So even at the level of basic training, but it's back to a point you made earlier. It's only for those things that you may need as an infantry officer, lieutenant, or sergeant coming through right now. There's not a whole lot of AI that they're really going to need. There are some things they're going to need to understand and know and how to leverage. Those things are all now being integrated into the courses. And the way we term it is data literacy. And I would describe it to them and to many audiences is the fundamental definition of data literacy is you're going to have to be able to read, work with, understand, and communicate with data. And that's what we've embedded in all of our courses, from basic training all the way up. Now, at different levels, you think, say at our level, we'd be communicating using data. We have to leverage the data to help us make decisions, inform how we make decisions. At a lower level, you need to understand how to work with it, right? You're the person flying the drone or punching in something, on the gun line, in your case. So you need to understand how to work with it and leverage it. Because when we think of younger generations, most people, I think, get it wrong, and I've corrected many. They're digital natives. We're like, absolutely, they are digital natives. They're not data natives. And so what we're talking about is with data and how we use data. Great, they can use their iPhone. They can figure out Chat GPT in a matter of seconds. Digital native, not a data native. So it's much deeper than what we're trying to get to. The Power BI, as an example, students, I went to Fort Jackson, which is where we train all of our AG or HR types in the Army. And I watched, specialists, so very young soldiers, demonstrate, almost a mastery of Power BI tools after like 2 weeks of training. You're like, great. So now they know how to read, work with it, analyze, not so much. But at that level, that's what you want them to do. And you know how it works in the military, going up in that hierarchy. Now that data is being formed to where a leader can make a decision with it. So we're kind of learning in that space. And I think back to the earlier point you made with Mr. McMillan is a productivity lever. I mean, he used those terms in one of his statements too about, where are we in the landscape? And it's like, that's a great term. It's a productivity lever. So where do you need it? I mean, for an infantry soldier, you just need them to shoot, move, communicate, survive. Okay, not a whole lot's going to change in that space. So not a whole lot of AI you really need to add. Whereas on the artillery side, on the air defense side, oh yes, they're getting more. So it's not about who's getting more or less. It's like tailored to who needs more and who needs less and why, and then scaling that over time throughout that career path that you described.
Yeah, to your point on the data literacy and digital native, the analogy I would use for our civilian listeners is, anybody that's involved in analytics, and that really took off in the mid to late 90s when we started having tools and resources. We could take vast amounts of data, and Walmart's got one of the biggest data bases next to the Pentagon. But the challenge was always, and not unique to Walmart, across retail, is it's not that you have a shortage of data. It's that how in the hell do you make sense of what you do have? How can you make good decisions off of petabytes, multiple petabytes of data?
Yeah.
And in the analytics world, we always knew, and when I had, when I was I think they now call it a chief of staff at Walmart, but the staff director, analytics was one of the teams I had that reported to me. And I quickly found out, and I'm no ones and zeros guy, sir. I'm the kind of guy that's like, okay, level up for me, stop with all the, the ones and zeros gibberish, and just tell me, where's the train going to come off the tracks?
Yeah.
And I began to gain a real appreciation for the two types of analysts. One that could wear you out with visuals and reporting the news. And it was a distinctly different skill to be able to tell me the story behind the data. Yep. Synthesize that for me at a strategy level to be able to say, yes, here's a lot of information, but basically here's what it means, and here are your potholes, and these are the roads you need to take to avoid them. And that, to me, kind of resonates exactly with digital native, the young soldiers that could program an iPhone at age 3, but they can't tell you what it means. They can't put it to directly. And that is the same challenge in private sector. I mean, my case, of course, Walmart. It's like, guys, I get it. That's a pretty chart, but what the hell does it mean? Tell me something about what it means, that if I go in and sit down with a COO who's probably going to give me less than a minute to tell them what the problem is, I need a different level of analytics. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely what I'm talking about. And especially when you get to that, analyze what does that really mean? And then who's doing it? Because like you said, there's a lot that could, think they can do it well, some that really do it well, but then more important on the far end of that definition is like, now you have to communicate using data, right? And it's just to your point, telling that story. And I love the saying by, Albert Einstein. He said, if you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough. There's a lot of people that understand it very well, but then explain it simply, right? For that decision maker. And that was something else that I became a little bit, kind of adverse to, was data informed decision or data driven decision. And I was like, look, I sit in the camp, I'm not a data driven decision type person, because as that leader, it's going to inform what I do. I just need, as you astutely pointed out, who's delivering it, how are you presenting it, how are you laying it out, so that I can make a decision. I don't necessarily believe in, some people do, that it's going to drive my decisions. I mean, yeah, the dashboard may tell me what the dashboard is going to tell me, but again, judgment. It can't give me judgment. It can't give me, the reasoning. It doesn't have that in there. It may give me some good answers that look well. And the other thing, and this will fascinate you. I just finished reading Angus Fletcher's book that I talked to you about earlier, Primal Intelligence, and he uses an example in there where our special operations forces, so nothing classified because he put it in his book, use this, wargaming type tool, and more of those are going to come into fruition, as well. And it has everything in it. I mean, not the term he used, but, we were using terms before I left the Combined Norms Center in Leavenworth, war break. Just think about, if you had a system, you can put all the history in there, go back to Napoleon, further than that if you like, put in all of your doctrine, put in every war game you've ever seen, the AERs, put all that stuff in it. And then now you try to compete against it or fight it, right? And he said, now, and this is a recent book, he said a lot of the leaders could defeat that AI instantly. And it was like, well, why is that? It's because it's got all this history, all these things that you can war game, like, 10x times, in terms of courses of action and all of that. But a human can still beat it. And it's like, well, why can it be beaten? Well, it doesn't have initiative. And so that was key. That's why the human could always beat it, is like, they couldn't realize a point in time where now you need to exploit this initiative or exploit, this advantage, with initiative, not really going to realize that. I mean, it's got a great repository of things and how to play it out and how to set certain actions in place, but where it needed to execute initiative, not there. So that's where the human could always defeat even a system like that, which surprised me. I mean, that surprised me when I read about it, because there's only a few now that have those capabilities, but we're trying to build more. When I left Leavenworth, that was one of the things that we're doing for our majors, is like trying to build tools very similar to that. So again, you can see them in operation, how you need to think about them through them, and then you're going to see gaps. You're going to see where the gaps are. So back to that creative level of thinking, and then using those tools to augment or automate those things that are still going to require human cognition.
Are there certification? And again, sir, if it's something you can't share, we don't wear feelings on our shoulders here. So if you say, look, that I can't really get into that, no biggie. Um, for career pathing in the military. So again, for the civilian listeners, from lieutenant to captain, then you jump into the field grade of major 04 and on up the chain. At what stage today do they really get immersed in AI proper instruction? Is that in the captain's career course? If I was commissioned a second lieutenant this coming May, when would I expect to see formal instruction on AI?
Yeah, as soon as you get to your basic course. So I mean, now
Okay.
that we knew we had to make that change, but again, it depends on, based on branches where you sit, how much immersion do you get? I'll give you
Right.
examples. If you're going on the cyber side of the house and you're a cyber officer at Fort Gordon, or a signal officer, both going to Fort Gordon, then you're going to get a lot more. I mean, they're up into 1,400 hours. I mean, while they're there, if even a
Holy cow.
logistician for
Okay.
logistics, when they go, they're up in the 900 range. That's across several courses, but they're getting it there. And you think logistics, AI, I mean, in the Army, it took people a little bit to get their arms around it, but coming from
Yeah.
Walmart, you're like,
Oh yeah.
logistics is standard.
That's the
That's kind of,
lifeblood.
yeah, that's kind of everything.
Yep.
But again, a higher level, and then intelligence. So same thing. They're getting it and then getting more in various courses as they go, but it's all tailored. It's not a cookie cutter equal, solution across the board, but they're getting it. And we assess. One thing that we did not have, but I think this is a unique advantage. We partnered with a company to help us develop a what we call data literacy assessment, because our point that we talked about, you'll have digital natives and some that are really good. You have kids that are high school, even grade school, that can code. I mean, they're
Mhm.
they're like data. I wouldn't say data natives in the sense, but they can code. They can make programs.
Yeah.
All these things
Yeah.
without formal training. So when they come into the pipeline, how do you know what you're dealing with? And so the goal there is, you come in, you take an assessment. Okay, Brand's going to take it. Beagle's going to take it, but we figure out Brand is like, you're a little bit different, whether it's something you've developed or just your natural tendency, your natural intellect or acumen for data and AI is like there, then we're probably going to give you a little bit more. So now designing courses to where it pulls you even further. It doesn't pull you back to where I am, where Beagle is. But if Beagle's at a low level, now you just kind of go the course, get to a certain point, but we've got to advance you to another point because you already have a baseline. So now we can assess across all of our courses coming in, where are you? And then, oh, by the way, if you need to leverage that, somebody will come and go, hey, you know what, Elverson, uh, you're not artillery material. You need to go to cyber. You might not want to do that,
Yeah.
but then they're going to show you on this chart, look at where you sit. And that's like with no formal training. So there's something in you and about you that we need to leverage somewhere else.
Wow. That's very different. I was year group 84, and I think you're 90.
90.
Yes. And I when I was in ROTC at the University of Alabama, since I had briefly been a police officer before mom said that was the end of that and you're going to college, I was loving life, and mothers always know best. So I was in ROTC, and not by any, to your earlier point about any particular motivation or initiative. It was more my innate proclivity, if you will.
Mhm.
Math. I was good at math somehow. I I I don't know. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't like, I just kind of stumbled into it. And so I initially wanted to go to the military police corps because I thought, well, I'm a criminal justice major. I've been a cop. That's what I want to do. And, the Army, Uncle Sam tells you what you're going to do. And I got shifted over to field artillery. Thoroughly enjoyed it. But that's interesting that they do that now, is more assessments than what I was used to back in the day. Once you left OBC, that was pretty much it.
Yeah, yeah, and the ASVAB will give a little bit of a taste of that, but it's funny you talk about our connection in criminal justice degrees and everything
Yeah.
else, but it shows a point of different paths. You were good at math. I was horrible at math, so that's why they pulled you to artillery because that
Yeah.
deal with artillery and you have to have a good math mind. And infantry, not so much, right? As long as you can count to a
Yeah.
hundred, you're good, and pull down your ranger bees to get your pace count. You're okay. So.
Yeah, and this, I think this is a great conversation because I know a lot of students at Bama, through these conversations, they had heard about this, and I've been recommending they read your article to kind of help them understand what is it they really need to expect when they join the workforce. And I'm also very fortunate. I'll be talking to the ROTC cadets um, 3 times down there. The MS4 is kind of a different conversation about, you'll be commissioned soon. So here's what you need to look at. And then, of course, the MS1s through 4 later. But it's going to come up. And the guidance that I give is much the conversation we're having now is that as a member of management, so college graduate going into private sector typically would be a salaried employee, not hourly. And as part, at some point, pretty quick in the mix, you're going to be a member of management, whether you've got a team of yourself or a team of 20. And being able to understand that value prop, and the analogy I always use is the analytics analogy. Anybody can report the news. It's distinctly different to tell me what it means.
Yeah.
And that puts them at ease with AI that, dude, nobody's going to expect you when you go to Walmart straight out of college, walk off the stage and report to Walmart to code anything. They're more interested in your ability to leverage that technology to help you make better decisions based on data. Back when I joined Walmart in 95, a lot of it was gut instinct. And we moved fast. We broke a lot of things. Not everything was right, but we moved fast.
Yeah.
Well, now we have a whole lot more tools than we did back in the day to be able to do that. I don't know the percent, and I don't know if you do or not, but how many officers pull the full 20 versus the usual tipping point for the civilians here is usually after 4 or 5 years, 6 years. That's really when captains make the decision, am I in it to win it or am I good? And I know academy grads still stay on mandatory 5 years, is it, sir?
Right. Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So let's say 50% get out at about 6 or 7 years, and the rest stay in to follow a career path. What would you suggest differently for those transitioning out? So we have listeners. I mean, we had General Petraeus on a couple of years ago, and he talked heavily about his experience in transitioning out, even though he was a flag officer like you, very different than when a captain gets out. What counsel would you give them today, knowing that after 6 years on active duty, hopefully a company or a battery command, exposure to AI like you're talking about, which to me sounds pretty robust compared to where I think the civilian sector is today. Yeah. What counsel would you give them if I'm a former battery commander listening to this podcast right now and I'm getting ready to jump? What would you caution me for in this space?
Yeah, and Brand, I mean, I wouldn't want to blow smoke at you in terms of caution, but I think the things that you already laid out and what you're telling them now, because I was thinking through as you're forming the question, it would be about decisions. I mean, I wouldn't look at this. I mean, as great as all these tools and technologies and capabilities are going to be, don't view it as a hack. Don't view it as, some type of cheat that's going to give you an advantage. Because at the end of the day, wherever you're going to sit or want to sit, or even if you're sitting beside somebody, it boils down to decision making. How are you going to use this to help you make better decisions? And those decisions will run the gamut. I mean, how many people do we hire this year versus whatever, profit and loss? I mean, those type of things. I mean, how are you using it to help you do that? Because you have a part in that, because that is going to get you only so far. And it's not going to take you much further than that, because it's going to run out at some point. It may give you a great answer and you take that and run with it. There's going to be problems, because just think simply with Chat GPT. If you don't have a fundamental understanding of prompting, it's not, you can ask a very simple question and get a great answer. But if your prompt is garbage, the answer coming out will be garbage. It may look good. This is going to be, garbage with a bow wrapped around. It's going to look pretty nice, but you don't know it's garbage,
Yeah.
so you still need to be smarter than everything that you're using. And I think with all the things out there, today with just micro learning, things that you can leverage. I mean, every app you download now is like, hey, let me help you learn this with AI or the
Yeah.
AI capability. Okay, I trust that. I mean, but again, it's back to your own instincts. How much are you going to trust it? And another thing that you've got to formulate in this journey is like, how much are you willing to trust, these new tools and capabilities to then use them to factor into your decision making and to help someone else do decision making. So that would be one thing I would say in terms of overall, and then the transition space is just keep learning. I mean that lifelong learning is a thing, and I mean I have learned more I think in the month of being retired. I wouldn't say that I learned in 35 years, but just new
Yeah.
things, new ways, new approaches is just keep learning. And that's what's going to give, anybody the advantage, whether they're transitioning out or staying in is you've got to have that desire and that willingness to continue to learn.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I often share with people I've learned more about myself in the 7 years I retired from Walmart than I have my entire life because the environment is so much different. There are no boundaries. There are no corporate scripts to stick to, or in your case, military, guidelines, uh, and it really does take the blinders off. And then, if to your point, if you're truly a spirited learner, sky's the limit. And that's kind of the caution I give to college students. I'm like, look, your formal instruction's over, but you don't go to a book anymore. You should be in a place now where you can help yourself make decisions. And so when you do join the workforce, jump in with both feet and know that it's okay to make a few mistakes and go for it. It's really quite different. And the only other point on transitioning, and again, because I want to respect the veterans that are listening to us. And by the way, sir, our following is global. When we go back and do the analysis, we have a lot of people overseas that listen to these. One of the things that General Petraeus said, and I had to, I kind of laughed. I'm like, I wished you'd have told me that when I was leaving the Army, is we don't know how to monetize our skill set. We don't know how to put a price on. I was very fortunate. I had two battery commands in Europe back to back. My nominative assignment was Fort Sill as an instructor at the gunnery department at the Field Artillery School. And I got out. And at the time, having finished an MBA, I was just glad to have a damn job.
Mhm.
I was not in that mindset of, wait a minute, I've got 11 years in the world's most powerful military. I was an officer. I did, pumping my ego. And I actually took a pretty significant pay cut as a captain to join Walmart. What would your counsel be? And I don't want to get us off track, but I think it's immediately relevant for our listeners to be able for them to monetize themselves. How do you? I know there's probably no instruction on active duty to say, look, if you're a captain, you're worth 80 grand a year base. If you're a major, it's 120 grand. I know there's no formula like that, a pay scale, if you will. In all of your years in mentoring, and of course, I'm sure you have people you stay close with that got out years ago. Has that ever come across your radar as, gosh, I wished I would have known how to value my military experience?
Yeah, plenty of times. I mean, we could have our favorite beverage at some point. I could share many stories, especially from young junior officers that have gotten
Yeah.
out that work for me, and I got to share it because we're on. But one of my
Please
after he
do.
got
This is
out,
good.
and he was a lieutenant of mine when I was a captain, and he pulls up to the Pentagon one day, and he'd already gotten out, and he said, "Sir, can I come pick you up for lunch?" And I said, "Okay, yeah." So he pulls up, Brandon, and he's in this black coupe Mercedes. And when I say black, it was like a matte black. It was like matte
Oh,
black, like
that's my
Batman
favorite,
looking type
the
thing.
matte black.
Yeah. And then the doors went up, the other way. And I'm
Hallway.
looking at this thing and I get in and I'm like, oh boy, you're doing something illegal. And the first thing he says, this is one of two on the East Coast. And I'm like, oh, I know you're doing something illegal at this point. I'm like, because you got out, as a major. I take it back. He got out as a major. And I said, what do you do? And it was exactly what you said. He said, I did my resumes. I went out, got these jobs, pretty good jobs. But he had this, epiphany about translating service to value.
Yeah.
And he, figured out, just through talking to a lot of people, like, how do you translate? Because what we do, like you point out, we do for free. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
happy to do this like for free. Our spouses would kick us, in the shins for saying that, but
Yeah.
because that's just kind of what we do and what we've learned, and we don't know how to place a price tag on it. So
Right.
through the course of doing his resumes and interviewing and everything else, he created his own business to help veterans. I don't think he has it, now, because this would have been probably about 10 years ago or so. But helping them translate that service into like value and like, hey,
Yeah.
how much someone else on the outside gets paid to do this, and you could do this in your sleep. He's like, you need to put that price tag on it. And I think that reduced some of the guilt. It just happened to me last week. I went out and did
Hmm.
a 2-day leader development seminar, and someone came up to me after. I won't even tell you what I charged him. It was like little to nothing. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
because it's like I do this for free all day. And the
Yeah.
person came up. He said, "Sir, I took a similar course at like Cornell. I hate to throw the university name, but they're everywhere." He said, "This is beyond what I got there. I'm not just blowing smoke at you. I'm not going to tell you how much I paid for that course, but I can tell you what you just did was like makes that pale in comparison, because it's what we do, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you know it growing up in it." And I'm like, yeah, okay, don't tell my wife that. So don't let
Yeah.
her know that. um, but it
Yep.
is. It's one, I think, getting over, and I've experienced it myself, a little bit of guilt of one, just translating your service to value. Because if you're taking that to an organization or anywhere else, this is the value that you bring. And there's
Hmm.
nothing to be shamed about, like that price tag that's attached with that value that you're going to bring, because you're bringing that to that organization, because they would gladly go out and pay someone else to bring that same value in, but you have that same value. And don't be bashful to say, here's my worth, because I know the value that I'm going to bring to the table.
Yeah. It's tough to do, even, say Walmart. So people that, work at Walmart for a number of years, it's the world's biggest retailer. 15 years ago, you could write your check anywhere else you want to go. Amazon wasn't the Amazon it is today. You could go anywhere you wanted to go, but you had Big Blue on your resume, Walmart.
Yeah.
Not so much the case anymore, because you have Apple, you have Amazon, and being able to monetize, and it's almost a fault of humility. So
Mhm.
most veterans don't walk around with all their awards on their shoulder once they put a suit on. You know, we know you're a general officer, Petraeus, General Petraeus, same thing. Um, but to be able to try and translate that wealth of experience that no civilian will ever see in many cases is directly translatable. I discovered early on at Walmart, and it's the intangibles, it's discipline, it's drive, it's the thirst, and perpetual curiosity and reading everything you can get your hands on. And when I first went to Walmart, yes, I had an MBA, but I had no practical knowledge. I didn't know, come here from Sikkim, about even the difference between cost and retail. I was lost. But my first assignment up in upstate New York, and I took the training manuals the stores use home, and
Mhm.
literally probably the only person that's ever done that, read all of them cover to cover, and would challenge people in the stores. If I read something, I'm like, all right, let me translate this. Here's what I think this means. And I would set it down. And uh, it those are the when I talk to veterans that are getting out and they're like, okay, what can I expect? I'm like, dude, you're stumbling over mouse turds, as my first sergeant used to say. You're better than you think you are, and you have a hell of a lot more value than you think you do. So don't go in and let them undershoot you and say, well, we're only going to pay you X. And I give them brackets of what they ought to be making at that level. If they were an O3, obviously flag officer is a lot different. But being able to monetize through the skill set, and AI is going to be that new one. If a battery commander gets out today and they have all of those learnings and education in AI, I would venture to say they're going to be ahead of their peers in competing for placement and management level jobs in retail right now.
Yeah.
They're
No,
going to have to be able to explain what they know, though.
yeah, right. Yeah. I think they will, because I mean, that's where we're focusing. And again, it goes back to the point we talked about earlier with decision making. I mean, not only do you know, you may not know every single thing about it. You might not be able to code as an example, but you know how to use it. You know how to
Yeah.
compete with it, right? You know how
Yeah.
to analyze, at a higher level, some of these things that you're seeing that others, I don't think they'll get. I mean, experience, yes, will bring that to you.
Yeah.
But you're right. You've got to be able to monetize your value, and there's so much value that our veterans bring to the table. One thing somebody told me, even as a journal officer, they said, whatever you think your value is jack it up by 10%. That's probably not enough. And
That's not enough.
and be okay with it. And then that
Yeah.
one officer I told you about, another thing that he told me, he said, he went into his next, real job interview because he kind of figured this out, and said he laid out a price, for his worth, knowing that he gotten out as a major and only reached a certain level. And here's, stock options that he wanted and something else. He showed it to his wife, and she said, "You're nuts." She said, "You're absolutely nuts if you think you're going to walk in and put that on someone's desk." And
Yeah, you'll get thrown out of the room.
right. He got that plus more when he went in,
Wow.
because they truly realized it. And he said, yeah, he said things that we learn intuitively how to do, and things that we know. You mentioned several that we just have inherently.
Yeah.
All of us. I mean, discipline. Those type things. I mean, loyalty. Understand. Ethics, and being ethical, and making good decision making, and all decisions, and all those things. I mean, yeah, he had in spades, and he just had a couple other unique skills that he knew how to use, and they recognize that, and they're like, yeah, we we can't just buy that right off the street. Almost,
That's right.
I'd say completely ready made, but like you're gonna achieve 90% of what we need you to achieve in this particular job, right? And compare that to 10% of the people that we could go find. That's probably not going to happen. And
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. After, our then CEO, Bill Simon, was a naval officer. And he was really the first kickoff with Walmart Corporate. And I've forgotten what the numbers were, but back probably would have been 2003 ish. His commitment, we're going to hire 500,000 honorably discharged veterans in 5 years. There was some goal, and they blew it out of the water. Typical Walmart. They got way ahead. But it was really only then that the value prop, and it's still not perfect, of civilians to understand the value prop. Okay, you are a veteran, so you've had experiences I'll never understand in a lot of cases. And that's worth an incremental plus up from a college kid. So, one thing, and then I'll shift gears back over to the AI. One of my biggest mistake at Walmart, and it never dawned on me till years later. I'd been there about 18 months, and I was wanting to do more. I had no direct reports, and life was great. I loved what I was doing. I had more than I could handle. I mean, it was great. And I remember going to my boss and asking him, about promotion. How does that work here? Because obviously on active duty, you don't go ask the battalion commander, "Hey, when am I going to get promoted?" You don't ask for a raise, none of that. So I'm like out of my element. And he's like, "Well, the next step is direct reports. And you've never had any direct reports. And so we're going to end." General Beagle, it was this as if I had forgotten my past life. It never dawned on me to share with him. I appreciate what you're saying, but I had 2 battery commands. One was 170 soldiers, a service battery and a cannon battalion. An MLRS battery is 110-ish. During the Cold War, part of it, et cetera, et cetera. It never dawned on me to share that, to have him understand, I think I can handle 2 people. Pretty sure. Not positive, but I'm pretty sure. It never dawned on me. So for the veterans listening on the call, I think this is immensely valuable, sir, because we are finding common ground with military and civilian, because at some point most everybody gets out and they have to join the private sector. At a macro level, where are your concerns with AI? Or do you see any that are like, you know what, if I were Doug McMillan, I'd be looking at that, because that concerns me?
Yeah, no, I mean, and there's multiple. I mean, one, the how do you adopt it? Because again, I think there's a lot of pitfalls within that. Because for if you're a business and never having run a business but been part of large organizations, what problem are you really going to use it to solve? I think you made a reference similar to that earlier. And then how do you educate? How do you educate? And even if it's something on the factory floor, I mean, people want to feel good about what they're doing. They want to be able to master something, but sometimes that comes with friction if you just put it out there and let them go. Not always the right way to do it. But if I educate you to use it, then that means I'm going to get better use out of it and better productivity at the end of the day. I mean, how do we integrate it? I mean, integration is always near and dear to my heart because that was a fundamental thing that we would do, for the Army at the Combined Arms Center. And it's not my model, but a model I would always use. From a great book I read, as a young major, and it talked about three ways to integrate something. You're going to shoehorn it, which means you're going to get it wrong. So just like using a shoehorn, I put my size, 11 and a half, foot in a not, size, 5.5 shoe. It could go. It's not going to feel very good end of the
Yeah.
day, but now you put the wrong thing in the wrong place. Not a great way to integrate. Or you can do ubiquitous. I mean, we're going to put it everywhere and see what happens. That may or may not work in some cases. It may work in the Army example, from that book was, machine guns. Do we put machine guns everywhere? They're awesome tools that we give everybody one. Not necessarily, right? We don't need to. But I mean, that kind of first thought was ubiquitous. Just give it to everybody. Um,
Mhm.
but that may not be the approach. And then the last is there a specialized way to integrate things in to where there's only a small, portion that need access to everything, be able to use it. I think you made a reference to that. Do I put this in my finance? Do I put it all in my HR and then a little bit over here somewhere else? Is looking at how do you integrate it in. And then the last thing, Brand, I would say is with regard to now, how do you maximize it? And always look through the lens of how is it effectively being used, consistently being used. And if we do those things right now, we're going to get efficiency because most people look for something, they want to jump to efficiency first. I mean, that's an Army thing I've used when I commanded Fort Jackson for basic training. And I'm like, look, my priorities, you look for what's effective first, what's consistent next. You can do it repeatedly over and over. That's going to gain you efficiency, but don't shoot for efficiency first because that's going to throw us a little bit off the path because you're looking for the most efficient way to do something, which is not necessarily the most effective. And just something as simple as basic training that resonated huge and allowed us to cover a lot of gaps. So there's ton. That's just my layman's way of viewing it. I know experts out there have more complex, complicated ways of looking at some of those gaps, but I'd kind of put it in those distinct areas.
Yeah. The one of the things that, and I've forgotten what podcast I was on with somebody. And the question came to me, of your comparison of time on active duty and civilian workforce, private sector, and it was only ever Walmart until I retired. I said, what do you see as the biggest difference? And I said, well, let me do a part A and a part B. Part A is quality of leadership. So in my mind, quality of leadership on active duty was better.
Mhm.
And again, it was in a time frame of 1984 to 95. Cold War was going on. It was a very different Army, I'm guessing, since after I got out in 95. But the quality of leadership was better. And the second part was we never on active duty ever were faced with the challenge of not understanding what was critical, different than important, different than routine. And in field artillery, as you can appreciate, sir, and the veterans on the call will, but I knew what was critical as a field artillery officer, and it started with safe and accurate fires. Number one, nuclear, when we had tactical nukes, and then, of course, under that, conventional munitions. You didn't get to make mistakes and survive it. So we knew those were critical, and that was part of the culture. It was innate. We did not have to be told that. We just knew what those expectations were. And yes, they were unforgiving, but that's the career field. And we knew the very different than important and routine. And it really distilled down to the difference that I took away was veterans know how to execute much better than civilians. And I was very public with this at Walmart. I'm not, saying anything that would insult somebody, but we were just the cultural expectation of execution was much higher in my experience on active duty than it ever was in civilian workspace. But relative to AI, and when you talk about efficiencies, being able to execute on what you do learn, I think will be a challenge in private sector, those that adopt. Because remember when we had the opening of the call and we talked about Walmart at least, and I'm sure Amazon's the same way, nobody is short of data.
Yeah.
The challenge is trying to figure out what the hell it means. How do I synthesize that to where I can sit down in front of a flag officer and in 30 seconds tell them the so what? And that's a challenge. And I think that's going to be a challenge now, is to be able to execute on what you do learn. And that will feed back into the efficacy. If I'm Doug McMillan, it's like, all right, we spent all this money, knowing Walmart, jillions of dollars on AI instruction. We're training everybody. Where's that showing up on the P&L?
Yeah.
Where's the money? How did that improve what I do? And that's, of course, a different dynamic on active duty than private. What were your top learnings as the commanding general at Leavenworth relative to AI, but also broader scope? Looking back on it now, what would you say were your top learnings?
Yeah, there were a lot, Brian. Probably a lot to distill down in a short amount of time. But I mean, I think I'll just kind of dovetail off what you said about being able to execute, and that is something that we know how to do very well. And when you think of it in terms of firefighting, it's like we're great firefighters. That's kind of what we grew up doing, because we can respond and like
Yeah.
execute nobody's business. But part of what we want to do as well, and do it just as well, is be able to anticipate. And nobody gets rewards for that. I mean, nobody gets reward for
Yeah.
not allowing the trains to wreck. But if you go out and you put out the fires at the train wreck, you're great. You get an award and like good to go and awesome. But if they never wreck, nobody is worried about you, and which is
Yeah.
okay. But that ability to anticipate, be able to see things, coming, because you have learned well, you have taken the experiences that you've gained, and now you can use them to prevent things from happening because of your ability to anticipate, which is why we lean heavily into just creative thinking. Like, open that back up. That is a different level of thinking than critical, but that ability to anticipate, that ability to learn from those things that you're seeing. Another key advantage that we have in the military is we do after action reviews. I mean, why do we do it?
Exactly.
It's not to go back and do what we just did better. It's to do it, so we don't get it wrong in the future. I mean, and that's a big difference in doing something enough to where, you get it right. It's like, we got to go beyond that. We're doing it so much that we can't get it wrong at some point in time. And it's those type things that I think I learned, more about in how to apply that, in our doctrine writing, in our leader development. How do you integrate those things into training? And then just integration writ large. I mean, one of the areas I think I, learned more than I really thought I would ever learn is, that's always the problem when you're talking at scale, is like, how do you now integrate, all these things at scale, and get, the efficiencies that you want out of it, on the other end. And that's for the Army side of it, whether it be a formation, new technology. How do you integrate it in? How do you scale it? Now, how do we sustain it, right? If there's something new, how do we integrate that into what we already have? Those were things that I, will just kind of keep with me, and hopefully leverage those in some new endeavors.
So, what for the perspective of the civilians listening to us, your reach as the CG, you had that instructional responsibility. What is we call it head count, the end strength of active duty Army today?
The active duty Army strength today, just for Army, is around 450. So that number is kind of ebbing and flowing based on recruiting and based on all the top line of where the chief and secretary wants it. And so their ideal goal is like 470, but that's just active Army. If you bring in National Guard and Reserve, now you're talking roughly 1.5 million. And we touch all components, of that, coming through the pipeline year in and year out, from basic training all the way up to what I would physically see at Leavenworth with our majors, company or battalion commanders, brigade commanders, your higher level commanders coming through those courses. About 200K per year that's going to come through the pipeline. And, that was kind of the reach, in all of those schools. And then there's other, schools and satellites that are out there taking care of that, which it all adds up to that, 200K that you're going to see in that pipeline. And for the nine centers of excellence that are in, multiple states that, most people on this
Mhm.
call, would recognize. I mean, you probably have one in their state. Then you're looking on average from 30 to 50,000 that are just coming through right there in their state for some level of training. And that's accounted, for as well, because it fell under the umbrella of Leavenworth and the Combined Arms Center.
So, to level set that for the civilian listeners, you're not far from Reach, where Doug McMillon is as the CEO of the world's biggest retailer. Doug has about 2.1 million globally people that he is working to do exactly what you just finished doing for the active component or for the Army. He's doing for Walmart, trying to get AI in. And so I think that's important in terms of perspective. Everybody knows what a general is, but that's a powerful, sustainable, durable reach in something as critical as AI. So I really appreciate your time, sir. If I may, you're on LinkedIn, so anybody that would like to reach out to General Beagle and talk more about this topic, and I would encourage everybody, and I think I did a post on it, to go back and read your article, Faster War, Smarter Minds, because that is exactly the theme of what we're talking about, and that's the exact challenge that the Doug McMillans of the world are facing today with AI. So I really appreciate it, sir, and I'll give you the last 30 seconds or so for any closing comments that you'd like to share.
Yeah, so really quick, a shameless plug to go in with, the article is, I've since written my book. I finished it. It'll be published here in mid-November when the map runs out. And what that talks about is, maps guide movement and values guide belief. And that's really where you want the leader to be. So when the map runs out, that's where leadership begins. And it's a metaphor of compass and a map. And leaders are the compass. And you got to have a good compass, good values, good judgment, be able to provide clarity, because at some point in time that map is going to run out. Your database, your dashboard, your strategy, your plan, your P&L, your KPIs, your OKRs, they're going to run out at some point, and the organization will look to you to go, which way do we go? And you got to orient. So that's the whole goal of my book, is helping leaders figure out, how are you may have a good true north individually, that's an individual thing, but now as the compass for that organization, how do you use that when your map runs out? And you know it just as well as I do, it never matches up on the ground. If fall
Oh yeah,
comes in, you've got problems, and people are going to
yeah,
look at you. The map will tell you you've got a fork in the road, but it's not going to tell you which road to take. It goes back to the compass. And so I think it's a great read, very short, very powerful. I call it protein, all protein packed. It's not a lot of fluff. It's not an academic
yeah.
book. It's not a scholarly book. It's for the practitioner. All protein, and that'll come out again in November. But I'll have many things up on my LinkedIn about that as well.
Oh, look forward to that very much. So, sir, it's quite an honor to be able to speak to you, and thank you so much for your time. Again, everybody, General Beagle is on LinkedIn, and he's an approachable guy. So, for the veterans, like I did, I was hesitant to reach out to you, sir, because you're a flag officer, but that's not his style. Reach out to him, start a conversation, and if you're in the civilian workforce, hopefully you got value out of this. And thank you so much again, sir, and we will be in touch. If you're up there in Kansas City, I'm only 3 hours south of you. So I might jump in the car and come up there and, to your point of a favorite beverage, and spend some time talking more about this.
That'll be
This is
awesome.
great.
I'd love it. Thanks so much, Brad. I appreciate the
Thank you.
time. All
Thank
right.
you, sir.
Thank you.